This is a Seaplane Pilots Association initiative to honour our lost friend Phil Dulhunty. I really appreciate everybody coming for this momentous moment, but I won't waffle on. I do want to mention two people in particular. Patrick, our operations manager, who's swinging the camera around at the back. He did all the artwork for this. It's all been hand drawn, and I think he's done a fantastic job. So I'd like a little applause for Patrick. And Rowan has also done a lot of the hard work. That's this guy here. The concrete slabs just don't lay themselves, and will bolt it down. And actually Wayne also helped. Rowan, definitely. One of our other committee members just there, Wayne Inglis. So thanks, guys. Now I'm going to hand over to Ben. He's a close friend of the Dulhunty, or Phil, and take it away. Thank you very much.
Righto. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. And as Dave said, I was a personal friend of Phil and associate of the family, probably for the last 25, 30 odd years. So I know a little bit about Phil's more recent endeavours, not so much about the early days of the association. However,
speak up a little bit, Ben.
Speak up, more volume. Okay, so look, as Dave said, thanks to everyone for coming today. Obviously, amongst pandemics and all the other restrictions of moving about, there are people that weren't able to make it today, but it's great to see so many here. It really is, and many have come from, I know, interstate and vast distances, so thank you. So look, today we're not only celebrating the 50th anniversary of SPAA, but we're also here obviously to commemorate the SPAA's founding member, the late Phil Dulhunty, and we're going to unveil this wonderful bench here and this beautiful spot here at Rathmines, the home of the Catalina flying boat. So look, in brief, I'll just give you a bit of a rundown of some information I have about the early times of the SPAA. And forgive me if the information's a little wayward or absent, because I certainly wasn't around in the early 70s to witness it. So officially, the association started on the 25th of January 1972. With the concept borrowed from the US SPAA, it was formed and led by Phil Dulhunty, together with a like-minded group of seaplane pilots and enthusiasts that obviously all shared the common interest of water flying, prosperous times, and from what I've heard, more than a frequent beer or two. At the time, a small number of seaplanes operating in Australia, and Harvey, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, included Piper Cubs, Super Cubs, Piper Pacers, Cessna 172s, 180s, 185s, the Lake Buccaneer, and the de Havilland Beaver. With some notable exceptions, there was a Piper Cherokee on floats and also a Nomad twin. Not too different from some of the aircraft still operating today. However, there was certainly an absence of the lighter and smaller recreational aircraft such as Sea Rays and Super Patrols, which we've got fine examples of down here on the ramp. Obviously no internet or no e-commerce back then, so communication was obviously done via published documents and sent out by the post. To keep together, various social splashing events were held to keep members in touch with each other. And once again, I guess those sort of events aren't too different from today, because that's why we're all here, which is great. So I note in attendance today, we've got two people, Harvey Pryor and Kevin Weldon, who I believe were original members of the SPAA back in the early 70s. Thank you, gentlemen, for attending. And look, if you've got any stories or tales specific to those times that you'd like to share with us all, I'd please invite you to do so either during or after lunch in the clubhouse. So now I'd just like to move on to Phil, and now a little about Phil and his association with seaplanes. As far as I'm aware, he'd always showed an interest in aircraft, and about when he was 16 or 17, World War II had broken out, and he endeavoured to join the Air Force. However, that didn't happen due to medical reasons. I don't think his knees passed the test. Nevertheless, he ended up being enlisted in the Australian Army Corps and was trained as an anti-aircraft gunner. So even though he had a love of aircraft, he was initially trained to shoot them down. And he was posted at the Georges Heights anti-aircraft battery, which for those who aren't aware is located in Mossman on the Sydney's lower North Shore. So one of his earliest encounters with a seaplane, he was on night shift guard duty on the 30th of May 1942. And many of you may know about this story. But whilst on night shift guard duty, he witnessed a small seaplane flying low up Sydney Harbour in the darkness. And initially they thought it was some sort of an American reconnaissance plane or something that had come back from a mission late in the day. As it turned out, this aircraft later proved to be that of the Japanese Glenn float plane on a reconnaissance mission the night before the Japanese midget summer attack in Sydney Harbour. So I'm really unsure whether this particular mystery and intrigue sparked his passion for seaplanes. However, nevertheless, some 50 years later, in May of 1992, after contacting and befriending the surviving Japanese pilot, Phil did gain media and historical attention by reenacting the reconnaissance mission over Sydney in his own seaplane. Another facet of Phil that may not be well known to many is that in 1949, after the war, I think Phil had sort of moved into an entrepreneurial stage, and he teamed up with the Transoceanic Airways pioneer pilot Brian Monkton. And believe it or not, together they operated a Sydney to Port Macquarie flying boat service in an ex-wartime short Sunderland. The service was called the Port Macquarie Clipper, and believe it or not, for a short period of time, it didn't last too long, but for a short period of time you could jump in a Sunderland at Rose Bay and fly up the New South Wales coast and alight on the Hastings River in Port Macquarie. And obviously do the return trip as well. So I just can't sort of imagine that today up in Port Macquarie. It seems it's a lovely coastal town, but that's what they endeavoured to do, and they did it successfully for a short period of time. With regard to Phil's personal seaplane ownership, and whilst living on Greenwich at Sydney Harbour, he was working at Wyong, not too far south of here, for many, many years. Rather than engage in the long daily drive, which I'm sure people who live in Sydney could attest, it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours each way, Philip pioneered the idea of commuting to work daily in his own Piper Cub seaplane. So times were a little bit different back then. In the 60s and 70s, the airspace around Sydney Harbour wasn't as liberal as it is today, so it was actually controlled right down to sea level. So Philip needed to get a clearance every morning and afternoon to depart Sydney and arrive. And he had to take off and land east of the Harbour Bridge. However, his residence was to the west of Harbour Bridge in the suburb of Greenwich. So Philip tells many a story of carrying out a high-speed taxi from Greenwich to the eastern side of the Harbour Bridge. But however, with the occasional boat wake or swell, he would tend to get airborne at times whilst underneath the Harbour Bridge. Once again, trying to do that today, I don't think he'd get too far and draw a bit too much attention. So. Phil operated a number of private seaplanes throughout his life, including the Piper Cub, Piper Super Cub, Helio Super Courier, and lastly the Cessna 180. And Philip and his wife Lenore shared many wide and various seaplane experiences, which included surviving 2 by-water accidents, which they both survived with minor injuries. Philip considered himself a great swimmer and never saw the need to wear a life jacket whilst on board, although they were very loosely, and I mean very loosely, carried in the aircraft somewhere. Phil held an unwavering passion for the PBY Catalina aircraft and their wartime historical significance in Australian aviation, and that's what brings us to this site here today. Whilst at the Seaplane Pilots Association helm, Phil partnered the SPAA with HARS, the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society, back in 1999 to purchase and return an operational PBY Catalina to Australia. This aircraft, which most of you may well know, registered VHPBZ, is the Black Cat that resides down at HARS at Albion Park and operated by them. Not satisfied the recovery of one Catalina, that's one PBY Catalina, Philip then partnered SPAA with other interests to purchase and return a second PBY Catalina to Australia, which arrived back at Bankstown in Sydney in 2008. This aircraft, registered VHCAT, is now owned by the Catalina Flying Memorial Limited and remains under restoration. The Memorial's goal is to see this Catalina back to flying condition in the future. So look, on the SPAA's behalf, Phillip held particular interest in the Rathmines Catalina base and the surrounding area, once again with the intention of recognising and preserving its seaplane significant history. Phillip and the SPAA over the years have actively participated in many Rathmines Catalina festivals in order to help promote the seaplane significant site. So with Phillip's passing, the SPAA hopes these efforts to preserve and promote Catalina history in this area continue in good faith by all relevant and interested bodies. So look, there are so many stories, achievements, dramas, adventures, tales, turmoils in the life of Phil Dulhunty. So much so, a few years back, he wrote himself a big book here, and you can see it's probably a week's read there, full of interesting stuff, and I'm very lucky to have a copy, and I have read it several times, and way too much to go through in 5 or 10 minute speech here today, but I believe copies of this book will be available at the club during lunch. Peter's brought a few spare copies up, so if anyone is interested. Never a Dull Moment by Phillip Dulhunty.
Box is labelled Never a Dull Movement.
Never a Dull Movement. So yes, they'll be available for anyone who is interested. So look, one thing we do know is that Phillip's drive and enthusiasm for the SPAA and for seaplanes in general never waned throughout his many years of active input and influence on the association. So before we unveil this magical memorial bench, there's a few people I'd just like to specifically thank. Phillip held the association together at times on his own throughout certain periods, I know, when committee members dropped off and things were quiet. But he didn't do it on his own, and he certainly had some help by way of his personal assistant, Christina Mumford. Now, Christina's here today. Christina worked with Phil for approximately 27 odd years, and I know that you would have handled a lot of SPAA administration and all sorts of things to do with the SPAA over the years. So, personal thank you very much on behalf of the SPAA and the committee today. Next, I'd like to thank the Catalina Club, and in particular President Paul Jacker and Vice President Alex McDonald for their organising this wonderful piece of real estate where we are today. Your efforts are very much appreciated, gents. Thank you very much. And also, just touching on what David mentioned earlier, the efforts of the current SPAA committee for organising this memorial and the SPAA's 50th birthday celebration. A special word of thanks, of course, extended to Rowan. You've already been mentioned as before. You put a lot of work into this bench with the coordination of its installation. Thank you very much. And also the SPAA Operations Officer, Patrick Vullerman, for a lot of time and effort spent on the artwork, which you'll very shortly see. So look, I think that's enough said. And look, without anything further, Rowan, can you please come forward and unveil this wonderful bench to all and sundry. So here's to Phillip Dulhunty, everyone.